One moment. Okay. All right, looks like we got one more person joining, so we'll hang on a minute and we'll go ahead and mark attendance. I've got it as past 1 o'clock now, so we should be able to go ahead and start. 1 second, let me put this phone on vibrate because I have left a couple of messages on people's phones this morning and they're able to call me back. All right. This week, according to the calendar, we are on chapter 4 and working from there. Let's see. Friday, they had a password issue pop up about logging into the different GNTC stuff as a student. They changed apparently change students over onto the same single logon system that the faculty has been on since late January. And as part of that, they changed the password requirements to where you had to have 14-character password, and apparently that generated some problem for some students. However, since y'all are in here at this point today, then that means yours is working fine and that you're fine on it. I had one student write me on it. The administration sent a note out Friday afternoon and told us there was a problem, and also sent a note and said there was a solution in Blackboard, which actually is still there. It's not inside of Blackboard, but it's on the outer page before you log in, where you actually click log on. Over on the right side, there's school announcements, and there's one called password issues. If you know somebody that's having issues trying to get into Blackboard now about their password or something, or about OTA, something like that is the name of the company that's now handling our logons and stuff thing, that they got software from them. OTA, something like that. Tell them to go and click on password issues and follow it. That the only requirement was that they did increase, the biggest thing that happened was it increases the length of the passwords now to 14 characters. And I think they were 8 before. Likewise, I think faculty ones were 8 before until somewhere later January when they went on to it. And then they went to 14 character passwords, which is what students now got. I just figured out an easy way of some stuff I could add onto my password. Mine was actually 10 characters before, so I had to figure out 4 more characters to add to it. It also loves to text you. I will warn you with that one. Because it let me use where I just added on to what I had and added some more stuff to it. So, and then I've had to change it at least once since, I think actually twice since, because it seems like every 45 days or something. Maybe it's more closer to 90 days, but it's often that we have to change our passwords. So that was an issue this weekend for some people. I had one student write me about issues with it. I don't know. I assume that they got theirs taken care of now. Nobody else had issues on that. For y'all, otherwise, this week should be for pretty much look like a normal week. I will be off campus Thursday afternoon and Friday, but I will be checking email. At that point, during that time period. Not necessarily all the time during that because I've got something else going on and I got some driving to do. But I will be checking for sure. Should be on Thursday evening. I should check email, and then Friday, as far as I know, I'll be checking email that morning and working on stuff during that morning. But I'll be off campus, and then probably that evening that I'll be back online again. I had as of Saturday, and I have not looked today. As of Saturday evening, I had everything graded that was due before today. Basically, it was due last Monday. All of that was graded and had been returned, including resubmissions, late submissions, everything else. So in the grade book, when there's a needs grading that I get to click on in each course, only things that it showed needs grading was stuff that was due June the 7th or after. But I really think it was all June the 7th. I don't think anybody is further ahead than that at that point. And so that stuff I would normally not grade until tomorrow, so that's still my intention. I probably will look in later today and see if there's some stuff that other late stuff that came in and grade on it. But I'm completely caught up on grading and have been for several weeks this semester. I also, in my Cisco class, had transferred test grades from a week ago. Although once we get through today, I'll have a test grade for them to transfer to besides some more grading and stuff. So we'll see how I do on that. And then next week, we will have our next session at the same regular time. The following couple of weeks, which actually is the rest of the semester, there's going to be some fluctuation on it. Next Monday, I'll give you details. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do that following week. I know I've got an idea. I'll let y'all do a collaborate session and us do this recording of what's going on. All right. Chapter 4 is implementing DHCP. You were introduced to DHCP when you took 2451. So you should know something about it already. Here, what they're having you do, and that what you really saw more of when you've seen it before, unless you've taken another server class, is you've seen the client side of what you do to set it up from the client to get them to go look in DHCP to get their information. This is looking at the server side. There's more to do on the server side because actually on the client side, there's essentially nothing to do because Windows 10 automatically is assuming you're using DHCP. So if you don't go in and put addresses in there, it's set on automatic addressing, and automatic addressing goes looking for DHCP first. And then if it can't find it, then it goes to AIPA, the Automatic Internet Addressing Protocol. So they're going to take you through and show you how you do set up your pools, how you set up holding certain addresses not to use, because pools are going to be the addresses that are available to be issued out, how to set up what the lease period is. By default, it's 8 days. You can also set up a lot of other information in the pools besides IP addresses and subnet mask. They will be showing you some of that. So you'll be setting it up and configuring DHCP. They'll have you do it for both DHCP version 4 and version 6. Version 4 is just DHCP. Version 6 is DHCP v6. But they're going to take you through on doing that. However, be aware on version 6 that SLAC, S-L-A-A-C, is more often used than DHCP version 6. Actually, Slack came out initially, and they added DHCP v6 protocol later because people were wanting it so much. Slack is a similar type thing, but doesn't require all this much setup like DHCP does. Because Slack does automatic addressing generation. It uses MAC addresses as part of the address, and then it gets a hold of the network address, and so it can come up with a whole address for each machine that is unique, but not use a pool or any of that type of stuff that DHCP does. However, a lot of people like DHCP. They're used to using it from version 4, from IPv4, and so they came out with a version of DHCP that works with IPv6. So that's what you're going to be doing in the chapter, is going through and seeing how to set that up and get all the different things in there. Exclusions. That's addresses you do not want it to be issuing out. Reservations are addresses that you're not going to be issuing out to just random machines. It's addresses that have been assigned to a specific machine, but we're doing it through DHCP. Exclusions often are addresses that you're going to assign to specific machines, and you don't want DHCP to even touch on it, that you're just going to statically assign those addresses. You do have to authorize your DHCP server, so that'll be a thing for you to do in there, and then you're going to set up lots of options. You'll set up what's the different type things you can include in there also. So there's a lot of different that on it and how to set up the network on it. You'll be able to create some super scopes, which is where you can combine parts of different subnets into a bigger grouping on. And so they'll lead you through on that. And DHCP can be used to assign much more stuff than just IP addresses and subnet masks. So you can do some other stuff out there too on it. They'll mention a little bit of that to you. And then they do mention the bootp is actually mentioned in here. But bootp has not been used for years. I don't know why they still bring up bootp. Bootp is what came before DHCP, and it just issued IP addresses. But bootp has pretty much been considered obsolete for 20 years or more, and yet they mention it in this book again, barely. So just be aware of that. Now, bootp, the only thing you could do was work with IP addresses. They mention about relay agents, and that is where if your DHCP server sitting on a different network than where your DHCP server is, that you can set a machine on there that says, okay, I'm a DHCP relay agent, so it just relays any DHCP request come to it to where the DHCP server is sitting over on another subnet. And so that's all that device is doing as far as DHCP is concerned. Now, it would normally be a server for other purposes there, but it's relaying all of those messages along so that you don't have to have a separate DHCP server for each subnet. And so you can mark on your pools about what network does this pool belong to. Also, do be aware through the chapter of the 4-step process of using DHCP. That it's first to discover, which is a broadcast message that when a machine's turned on, it sends out a broadcast message that is a discover, DHCP discover type message. And all it's saying is, I need an address. But at that point, it has no address, say. And it has no idea who anyone else is. So all it can do is broadcast it to everybody, and the server will get it. The server then replies back with a DHCP offer or an offer. It sends back an address and says, here's an address and other information that you can use if you want. So it offers it. Again, that's a broadcast because the machine has no address, so the server can't send it to a specific address. It does. That machine doesn't. It's there, but there's no addressing to it. That machine then will get that request, and it could get more than one if there was more than one DHCP server on the network. So if it did, it would choose one of them, typically the first, and respond back to that one saying, here's the one I would like. And that's a request. It's a request to use it. The other part that goes off on that is when that broadcast goes out for the when it sends out that broadcast saying, here's an address we're offering you. It's a broadcast, so every machine hears it. If there was a machine that had that address for some reason already, shouldn't have come from DHCP, but if you had multiple DHCP servers, could have happened. But if it happened in some way or somebody statically put that address in, that machine will send a broadcast out and say, you can't use that address. I already got it. So that's there for them also. Now, once the client sends back on that and says, I'm requesting to use this, that the DHCP server then marks it in there and says it's leased for 8 days by default and sends an acknowledgement, and so that will go as an unicast back to that machine, and that machine then knows it's completely can go ahead and use that address with no problem. Now, it is a lease. By default, it's 8 days, and after 4 days, after 50% of the time, it will send out a renewal request, the server. If it doesn't get anything back, it will send another request 50% of the time further, which would be after 6 days. And again, if it doesn't, it's 50% again. It does that several times, and then if it gets to the end of the 8 days and has never received a renewal from the client, it expires that address, puts it back in its pool, and the machine has been told not to use it any longer. So it goes through that. Now, you can also manually tell it to renew an address at any time by doing ipconfig/renew. And what that does is it sends a renewal request from the client, and it tries to renew it at that point and to kick off the next 8 days. The other one is if you have a conflict of addressing or something's wrong with the addressing you suspect, you can get rid of the address and have the machine with no address and then request a new address and start all over again. Now, you may end up with the same address, but it's a completely new lease on it. To do that, you will do ipconfig/release. That gives up your address. At that point, that machine has no address. It's just like it just got turned on. And then you'll do an ipconfig/renew. And at that point, it's asking for an address because it doesn't have an address, so it can't renew it. So the server says, you need an address then because you don't have an address. So it'll go through that 4-step process, and that's the first step of the request, the discover, of wanting an address. Make sure you are aware of the 4 steps of DHCP. DHCP, like I say, can be used IP version 4 or 6. If it's version 4, it's just DHCP. If it's the version 6 one, it's DHCP v6. Slack is also actually used and is an easier one, but people know DHCP and have used it for years, and so that's where they want to stay with it. So they came out with a version of DHCP to go with IP version 6 also. That there is a summary through the chapter. Questions for y'all? From y'all? And then if you run into problems on assignments, please let me know. And then let me see what the problem is we've run into, and Send me, if it's a command you're typing in that doesn't work, send me a screen print with the command and what you got back. Because that error message will tell me something about where the error is in there. A lot of times it's a typo mistake. The biggest thing is people have a problem of realizing when there's spaces and when there's not spaces on the commands when they give them to you in the book. Because they should have used a monospacing font, but they didn't. So it's hard to tell when there's a space, when there's not a space. Second thing is I can make sure that it's not something wrong with the command. It's possible that the command could be obsolete now. The other piece on that one is, as far as I know, it does not, because I have not had anybody writing and telling me about problems with any issues on commands. And if y'all don't write and tell me that there's issues with commands, I don't know there are issues with commands. So when y'all have a problem with a command, y'all need to send me a print screen of it and send it to me so I'm aware of it, and that then I can note it also. I hope to work on the stuff in the book at some point, but that's not been happening at this point. But I've had several students say that there's errors in the book, but nobody ever tells me there's an error in the book. That's why there's nothing there in notes in your assignments. That's where a lot of those notes will come from in my classes, is from me seeing what the problems are the students have had, and that also can assist you in solving the problem. That's why y'all need to write me when you run into problems on it. But as far as what I've been able to observe so far, based on stuff that's come back to me, I wouldn't know there's any errors in the book, because I have not gotten any feedback from students in this class about errors in the book. And that's what I have to go by. And that, because I haven't had a chance to go through and work on these. And in some cases, I've had students trying to tell me there were errors in books like these, where it's commands typed out there, and that they just were not reading the spacing correctly. And that it really was partly because of, that's not where it needs to be mentioned to me. I don't read the notes real well in the assignments, because at that point, it's past the point where I can answer questions about it. I try to read on them, but I don't see that as well right there. And it's also a whole lot more helpful if you send them to me when you encounter them, because then that can be helpful to your classmates, and if they did the same thing, could be helpful to you, for me to be able to post it on out there was an error on it. Now, I have not noticed them in there, but I will try to notice if you do. But if you're, depending on where you're putting it, I may not be particularly noticing it. The submission comments is not the place to put it, because that's not read until I'm grading. And likewise, if you're putting it in with your print screens, sometimes I'm not going to notice a note out there in the print screens as I'm going through them that most people are just putting the assignment, the chapter, and the activity number with their screen, and some people put on there a comment of what it was supposed to be doing. So I don't always read those little notes. The best thing would be is to send an email to me. But really, the best thing to do, Colby and Nicholas, is send it to me in an email. Because, yeah, it does tell me when it pops up in the that when there's a discussion post that pops up in there, that there's not been many of those, and I can't always depend on that, and I'm not always clicking over there looking at general discussion to see what's sitting there, and that could be several days before I even look at it. All right, any other questions? If not, I'm going to wrap up the recording.